You're listening to the Mother-to-Baby Podcast, medications and more during pregnancy and breastfeeding. Ask the experts with your host, genetic counselor and mom of three, Chris Stallman.
Welcome to another episode of the Mother-to-Baby Podcast. My name is Chris Stallman, and I am a genetic counselor, I'm a teratogen information specialist, and now a mom of four. We welcomed our little girl about 6 months ago. Gosh, it seems like such a long time. For those of you who are new to our podcast, a teratogen information specialist is someone who gives information about exposures during pregnancy, breastfeeding, before pregnancy, and in cases of adoption. And exposures can be anything. So it could be cigarettes, it could be medication, it could be food and drink, like what we're going to focus on today. Today's episode, we wanted to take a little bit of a lighter approach because, of course, there are big things going on in our world at all times, but we also need to make time for some of the less dramatic questions that we get. And so today we're going to be talking about kombucha, which, if you don't know what that is a fermented tea, usually from green or black tea, that people consume as a drink. And you may be wondering, okay, well, if it's a drink, if it's tea, why are there questions about pregnancy and breastfeeding? And the good news is we have an expert who's going to give us the answer to that question and many more. You may recognize her from previous podcast episodes. Her name is Lorrie Harris Sagaribay. She is the coordinator of MotherToBaby North Carolina. She is a bilingual teratogen information specialist, so she does counseling in English and Spanish, not only by phone, but also through email and over live chat. She has been in the field of maternal and child health for over 25 years. She is an incredible human being, and we're really glad to have her back on the show. Lorrie, how are you doing?
I'm fine, Chris. Thank you so much for having me back.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm really glad that we're able to talk about something that may seem like it doesn't come up very often, but I know that I've gotten it more and more often over time. And I know that you wrote a blog about it actually because Mother-to-Baby in general gets so many requests.
Right. It's becoming a more and more popular topic as more different varieties of kombucha can be found on the shelves.
Okay. And on the phone, we have Ali Rodriguez from Minneapolis, Minnesota. But before we get to her, why don't we start out with the very basics? I kind of mentioned what kombucha was, but can you give us more information about it?
Sure. Kombucha is a sweetened tea that, as you mentioned, is usually a black or a green tea. And it's mixed with yeast and sugar. And then it's allowed to ferment for a period of weeks. And the final product is a fizzy, vinegary, some might say tangy, beverage that has a lot of naturally occurring probiotics and good bacteria in it that are claimed to have numerous health benefits.
Okay, so people drink it for health benefits, or they drink it for taste, or probably a mix of both, right?
Right, and it's kind of fun. It's fizzy, and it's light, and it's refreshing, and people tend to have a really strong reaction to kombucha. They either really love it or they really don't like it.
Yeah, I think that whenever you have vinegary and fizzy, you definitely have people who are of two minds. For sure.
Right. It's a pretty unique flavor.
Yeah. Have you had it? Do you enjoy it?
I have had it. I will not say that I enjoyed it, but I have had it, yes. I tried it with a very open mind.
There you go. That's the answer. Trying to keep an open mind. That's awesome. Okay. So obviously we are not the only ones with questions on this. We have Ali on the phone from Minnesota. Actually, about a month ago, we were going to have Ali on the show, but Mother Nature had other ideas. Ali, what happened?
Yeah, so about a month ago, yesterday, actually, I went into labor. My water broke, and I gave birth to my son, Hunter.
Wow, that's excellent. I remember it was actually about 15 minutes before we were supposed to go on. So, yeah.
Exactly.
I cannot believe it was a month ago. How is Hunter? How are you doing?
We're doing great, actually. He's doing wonderfully. He's a good eater and growing and all that good stuff. And he's got an older sister, and she just adores him. So
Oh,
it's been a lot of fun.
excellent. And how are you feeling? Are you recovering, doing well?
Yeah, I'm doing very well. I was lucky, normal vaginal delivery, no complications. So I feel great, aside from the not sleeping part.
Oh, well, you know. So, my youngest was 6 weeks this past Monday, so I'm with
Oh,
you there. If
wow.
I could fist bump you
Yes.
virtually, I would. In the no sleeping parent club, so I'm with you there.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what we were going to talk about a month ago, we can certainly do now, which is excellent. And, you know, one of the cool things that I find, because you're a healthcare provider, right, Allie?
Yes, correct. I'm a physician assistant in women's health.
Okay. One of the cool things about being a healthcare provider, because I'm a genetic counselor, is that I don't know everything. And I know that probably sounds weird. It's like, wouldn't you want to know everything? And, you know, I used to be of that mind, like, oh, I want to know everything. But the cool thing about being a healthcare provider to me and not knowing everything is that I get to talk to other healthcare providers like you who have a completely different skill set, who know a bunch of things that I probably will never know without asking. And that way, not only do I get to get more information, but I get to talk to people who have different ideas, see things different ways, get different questions. And I'm super excited to talk to you today about kombucha. So, what questions are you getting from your patients in your clinic? What questions do you have about kombucha?
Yeah, so kombucha has been a big one recently, just because it's a relatively new drink that people are interested in now. Um, the biggest thing, obviously, is it safe to drink in pregnancy? You know, is this something that I can have and it's not going to affect my baby? You know, there's a little bit of alcohol content in kombucha, and so that's kind of what people's biggest concerns are. But, you know, kombucha is fermented, so there's live bacteria cultures in there, and so that can also have an effect, is what my understanding is. Now, can you shed some light on information that you have about kombucha?
Okay, Lorrie, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that, Chris. But first, I wanted to congratulate Allie on the birth of your newborn. That's an amazing story. And I'm so glad that after all of that, you've been able to join us on our call. So, Allie, you did hit on some of the concerns about drinking kombucha in pregnancy. And really, there are three major concerns that we have about kombucha during pregnancy. The first is alcohol, the second is bacteria, and the third is caffeine. And we can talk about each of those a little bit. Alcohol is a natural byproduct of the fermentation process in brewing kombucha. And many kombuchas are not intended to be alcoholic beverages, and they are required to keep the alcohol content of their product below 0.5%. That's 0.5%. And in the United States, beverages that contain less than 0.5% alcohol by volume are not required to have a label indicating that they're an alcoholic beverage. If they have more than 0.5% alcohol by volume, they are required to have a label that includes a health warning for pregnant women. But even if that label is not on a kombucha product, keep in mind that it does still contain some amount of alcohol that is naturally occurring from the fermentation process. So even if it's a small amount of alcohol, for many people, that amount of alcohol would not be something we would be concerned about. But in pregnancy, the recommendation of most major medical organizations is to avoid alcohol completely. There's no amount of alcohol that is considered or known to be safe in pregnancy. So even if we had the assurance that the label was accurate, it still might be best to avoid even that small amount of alcohol in pregnancy. But a greater concern is that label might not necessarily be accurate. There have been instances when the product continues to ferment in the bottle, even after it's on the shelf. This is less likely to happen if the brewer uses proper techniques, but it's not really an isolated event. There have been cases, like I said, where products that did not have the alcohol warning label were found to contain enough alcohol that they should have that label. And so, it's only the products that are intentionally brewed to contain more alcohol that are required to be regulated by the Tax and Trade Bureau or another regulatory agency within a state. But if a producer of a non-alcoholic kombucha says that they are creating a product that has a lower amount of alcohol, they are not subject to regulation. So the only way that we would actually know if their product contains more alcohol would be through random sampling by the Tax and Trade Bureau or another regulatory body in their state, or by a consumer report. And there is actually a mechanism through which consumers can file a report if they believe that they have consumed a kombucha product that contains more alcohol than what was indicated on the label.
Are there any studies about the use of kombucha during pregnancy or breastfeeding?
No, there are no studies specifically about kombucha. What we look at is what is in the kombucha. And so again, alcohol being one of those concerns. And then the fact that it's a fermented product means that in addition to the fermentation process creating all of these really good, supposedly beneficial bacteria, there's always the chance of the introduction of harmful bacteria. And again, if the manufacturer is using the proper sterilization technique, that should help prevent that. But in pregnancy, we have to be really, really careful to avoid foodborne bacteria. Some kombucha manufacturers will decide to pasteurize their product, which means kind of giving it a quick heat treatment at the end that can effectively kill the harmful bacteria. But of course, that also can destroy the beneficial bacteria and the probiotics, as well as the fun fizz that's in the kombucha. So some kombucha makers and people who drink kombucha really prefer to have an unpasteurized or a raw product. But in pregnancy, the recommendation really is to avoid unpasteurized products. And that applies to other things besides just kombucha. That's, unpasteurized milk and dairy products, honey, and other kinds of fermented foods. So this isn't specific to kombucha. It's sort of an across-the-board advice during pregnancy.
And Lorrie, I'm not sure if you can hear, but you do have a fan in the background who is cheering you on. That's my daughter's become quite mouthy.
I do hear that.
But she's like, yes, go, go. Our little fan club over here is cheering you on. Okay. So we know, and you mentioned it before, that there is no known safe amount of alcohol during pregnancy at any point in pregnancy. And so in terms of, is it okay to have in the first trimester, second trimester, third trimester, we know because of alcohol, that's going to be not recommended. But what about the bacteria? Is there a trimester where it's more likely that getting sick from a foodborne illness related to bacteria is more serious? So is it more serious if you get sick in the first trimester versus the second or third?
Not necessarily. It's something that could potentially be harmful to a pregnancy at any time. And again, with the alcohol, clearly, given that alcohol has a direct effect on the baby's brain, and the baby's brain continues to develop all throughout the pregnancy, there's really no time in pregnancy when we would say that it would be preferred or better to drink kombucha.
Allie, any other questions for Lorrie today?
The last big question is, are all kombuchas created equally? Is there one brand that's better than the other? What about home-brewed kombucha? Are any of those okay to drink?
Wow, Allie, you have just given us a Pandora's box of excellent questions. Those are all the things that we hear also. How do you know what the label's going to say? If it's okay, is there a certain time? What about breastfeeding? What about different brands? There's all of these different considerations. And Lorrie, what is it that you can offer to us in terms of Allie's questions and just sort of general guidelines about kombucha?
Yeah, that's a great question, Allie. And there's really no basis on which to compare specific brands. But when it comes to home brews, with the concerns about alcohol and the continued fermentation in the bottles and the possibility of bacteria, with store-bought kombucha, those concerns are even greater with home brews. For a home brewer, it's really difficult to measure or to know the alcohol content. It can be as high as 3% or more, depending on the amount of time it's fermented, the temperature of the fermentation, the type of yeast they use. And some home brewers use a secondary fermentation process because they want to decrease their sugar content and increase their carbonation. But that process increases the alcohol content even more. So with a home brew, it's virtually impossible to know how much alcohol you might actually be ingesting. And the second concern with a home brew is that the sterilization and the sanitation methods that are available in industrial kitchens are just not possible in a home kitchen. Even if you're trying to be really clean and really careful, the chance of harmful bacteria making their way into your final home brewed product is actually much greater. So really, the take-home message is that the safest route is to avoid drinking kombucha during pregnancy. If you do choose to drink kombucha, you should choose a pasteurized, store-bought product that is not labeled as being an alcoholic beverage. And you also want to try to avoid any added ingredients like herbals and botanicals that might be used for flavorings that are not normally found in food. There may not be any pregnancy studies on those types of additives to indicate whether or not they could increase risk during pregnancy. And above all, just make sure that you're avoiding any raw or unpasteurized products and avoid home brews.
And does the same go for breastfeeding?
Yes, in general, the same goes for breastfeeding. In breastfeeding, we're a little more lax, I guess, with the alcohol. If we do assume that the label is accurate and the product does contain less than 0.5% alcohol, that amount is unlikely to affect a breastfed baby if the mom drinks a kombucha, from time to time. If the mom is still concerned about the alcohol, she could wait a couple of hours to give her body time to metabolize that alcohol out of her bloodstream and out of the breast milk. As far as the foodborne illness concern, if a mom were to get a foodborne illness while she was breastfeeding, it wouldn't necessarily be able to pass to the baby through the breast milk itself. But of course, if mom is very sick, then she could accidentally get the baby sick just by touching the baby. If any of those bacteria are on her hands or in the home, it does increase the chance that the baby could get sick as well.
Sure, and it's miserable. I've had, GI issues, pregnant, breastfeeding or not. And it's like, golly, that's already a miserable situation. So we, of course, always want to try and minimize the chance we're going to get sick from what we eat or drink. So, Lorrie, I wanted to thank you again so much for taking time out of your schedule to be with us today. And I mentioned it earlier, but before you go, I was wondering, could you give us just a little peek into the blog that you wrote about kombucha?
Yes, the blog actually came out back in February, and it's really just a very nice recap of the things that we talked about today, some of the general concerns about kombucha that are related to alcohol, bacteria, and caffeine, and it talks about pregnancy as well as during breastfeeding. And you can find that blog on the MotherToBaby website,
which is MotherToBaby.org. Thank you. Thank you for that, Lorrie. And again, thanks for your time. Please stay as safe as you can out there. We hope to have you back on the show really soon.
So, Allie, thanks very much for calling in. Again, I know that time is tight and sleep is even tighter. So we're really glad that you could join us today. And I really appreciate bringing this question because actually, listeners out there, Allie approached us. Unfortunately, I didn't know of Allie beforehand. There's a lot of providers out there, but she is someone who decided to approach the podcast with her question. And that's what we definitely encourage. So I'm really glad you reached out with this issue. This is huge for everybody. And we finally had somebody ask about it and want to be on our podcast. So I wanted to thank you specifically for that.
Yeah, of course. And I just want to say thank you guys for everything that you do. I reference your website all the time. I'm constantly printing out your fact sheets to provide patients just because I think it helps them to have the accurate knowledge and have a good resource online that they can refer to when they have questions. So thank you guys.
Oh, that's so great to hear. And yes, I still too print out fact sheets. And we can also send links through mail. So, sometimes people are like, well, I don't want to, do that. We have more than one way to get people the information. So thanks for that. And so that's going to be a wrap for us here at the Mother to Baby podcast. I wanted to thank all of you for listening to us and hope that you will continue to listen to us in the future. Thanks to our guest expert, Lorrie, and thanks to Allie and her growing family in Minnesota. As always, if you have questions for Mother to Baby experts, you can reach us in a variety of ways. So you can always call us toll free at 1-866-626-6847. You can text us at 855-999-3525. If you have questions or comments about the podcast, if you have ideas for a new topic on the podcast, or if you want to be part of our podcast, feel free to contact us. You can contact us also by email, and the email address is contactus@mothertobaby, all one word, .org. And all of our contact information, all of our podcast information can be found on our website right along with Lorrie's blog at MotherToBaby.org. We hope to have you back for future episodes of our podcast, which are available on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcatcher. You can always subscribe so that way you never miss a new episode. And we do already have some recorded, so feel free to go back and listen to some previous episodes. So signing off, this is Chris Stallman, thanking you for joining us, hoping that you'll join us again in the future, and reminding you that Mother to Baby is here for you. Take care.
Mother to Baby is a service of the nonprofit organization of Teratology Information Specialists and supported by the Health Resources and Services Administration of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It's made possible through generous donations from listeners like you. To learn more about Mother to Baby, please visit mothertobaby.org.